Good morning and welcome to the Let's Talk Universal podcast, where we talk about all things workforce, neurodiversity, and inclusion. Today, I am joined by Samantha Amit, professional coach, leadership facilitator, and author of Mindfulness at Work. Welcome, Samantha. How are you today?
Thank you, Erica. I'm very interested and curious around today's conversation.
As am I, and it's wonderful to have you with us. I think perhaps we should start with where your journey to mindfulness began. So do you mind telling us a little bit about
Mm,
yourself and
mm, mm.
what the kind of turning point was for you?
Yeah, thank you. So I grew up in South Africa, actually, in a place called Port Elizabeth, which is a beautiful city on the coast. And my mother was always interested in health. And she would take me on holiday with her sometimes to these health farms that they had in Cape Town, which was a flight away. And so that, together with other things, got me involved in learning around things that you wouldn't pick up at school every day. And so I learned Reiki at a very young age, and I was always very interested in the spiritual world. And what really got me involved in mindfulness was I'm cutting a long story very short.
Okay.
I'd moved to live in Israel, married an Israeli, moved to live in Israel, and was working in high tech and had two small kids. And to be honest with you, I had very little help. And being this high achiever, being very busy in leadership, being a super leader, it was very hard for me to be a super mom. I used to come home, even then, I'm talking about, a couple of decades ago, there was already emails and we were already doing webinars. And I came home from work in high tech and I still had work to do. And it was very hard for me to switch off. And so I came to mindfulness out of actually just like a need to save myself from being this mum that would, get triggered when a kid was crying because I couldn't get him or her to stop crying. And I was great in my career, but as a mum, I found it really hard, had very little help. And so I knew that I needed some help, something to balance me, something to get me centered, give me confidence. And so by chance, I came to mindfulness because I just started experimenting with it. And then I saw how different I showed up. First of all, I started forgiving myself when I was shouting at my kids.
Yeah.
And so mindfulness is a lot about that. It's a lot about compassionate leadership. It's a lot about empathy and first towards yourself. And so with the change that happened in me, it was also so important for me to now bring this into leadership and share it with others.
And I think there is a relatable story there, in the sense that I think many people might have those same feelings and those same stresses in their own jobs and in their own lives at home, and balancing the two, especially in leadership. And what do you think the benefits for people who are leaders? What kind of outcome does practicing mindfulness um, help them to achieve or to be in the workplace?
While I do it with the leaders that I'm coaching in the meeting, they learn mindfulness experientially.
Right.
So the benefits are that it teaches you to be in the present moment. And there are many, many ways that you can practice it. It can be 5 minutes and it can also be 1 minute. And it can also be in a meeting where everybody's over the place, many voices, lots going on. You can use it in many, many different ways. But first of all, it always brings us back to the present moment because our minds are naturally all over the place. Technology does that to us. it's very hard today to keep our attention. It's very hard to stay present and, not have our minds going all over the place. So the benefits of mindfulness are vast. I mean, they're vast. They need to be experienced. Like you said, when you do the yoga or when you put on a music track, that's being mindful. If any leader today wants to, if music is for them, what helps ground them, what helps bring them into the present moment by listening to music, that's a mindfulness practice. One of the many attitudes that we practice during mindfulness, one of them is letting go. So we do need to let go of our calendar, to take that mindful pause, to do a few yoga movements, even in the office, to do some stretching, to take a few breaths. And so we let go. And we bring our intention maybe inwards to see what's going on right now. And we can get a lot of valuable information. Because what happens is when we stop and we pause and we notice our thoughts, we're actually bringing the unconscious into the conscious. And that can be gold, because we can be worried about something. And when we notice what that is, we can do something about it.
And do you think that there is something that these leaders are looking to achieve for themselves? Is there a problem that they're trying to solve that means that they're seeking out mindfulness and the coaching that you provide them?
Yeah. So a lot of the people I coach tell me that they wish they would have met me like a few years ago. Some of them do come to me where they are on the brink of leaving their company because, or leaving their career because they feel it's just too intense. I also coach leaders through companies that bring me in. And so the leader doesn't always choose to be coached. They're given it as a gift. It's part of changing the company culture. Like, for example, at UWI, you do a lot of diversity and inclusion work. So if a company wants to create a culture that's more psychologically safe, if they want to, upskill their leaders and bring in coaching and more mindfulness into the organization, so they'll bring me in. And then what I notice with a lot of the people I'm coaching, everybody has to meet results in a for-profit business. So the company's there for making money, but in a non-profit as well, there are also objectives and outcomes that, I've coached also in embassies. So there they have to do a lot of reporting. And no matter what, whether it's, for-profit or non-profit, we're all in always on society today. We're living in a world where we're always on, and that puts a lot of pressure on ourselves. We're taught to bring results, and we're taught to, to be very task orientated. It helps us to be very people orientated, first of all, towards myself and how I am going to be towards myself. But first of all, looking within. But then in mindfulness, you also look outwards. And how do I want to show up? So if I want to be more inclusive, right, and create that within even my team, how is that even going to show up? So curiosity is a big part of mindfulness. So it helps leaders to be more curious. It helps them to be more confident. You won't believe how many people walk around that are insecure. They're insecure, they don't feel confident, and they bring that into the meetings. They bring that into their relationships. A confident person knows how to give space. Confident people are naturally inclusive. confident people are not afraid of somebody else that is different to them.
I like that concept that people who are confident are inclusive. And I'd like to ask you a little bit about the ACT coaching program that you are offering, because I think those tiers within that program are useful tools to leaders. So would you mind talking us through that kind of tier and how that works?
Yes, thank you for asking. So, ACT is an acronym that stands for Achieve, Connect, and Thrive. And why I called it ACT is, first of all, because in my youth, I loved improv and I loved drama. We've
Yes,
spoken about this.
we have, yeah.
Yes. And so when I created this mindful leadership program, I envisioned actually even going into companies and doing role plays and like simulations with people, because often what we need to do is we need to act and we need to play out something that we want to practice. Mindfulness doesn't come naturally to anybody, although it is a trait. There are very few people that have high levels of mindfulness. So if I go back to, I created this program, which has 3 tiers, as you mentioned: Achieve, Connect, and Thrive. So the first tier, Achieve, is all about me and myself and how I can self-regulate, how I can master my emotions. And so it's coming back and strengthening myself on the one hand, so that as a leader I can be more productive and self-aware. And on the other hand, I want to always reduce my stress. So that's the first tier. How can I achieve more and be less stressed?
Yeah.
The second tier is about connection. Now we are surrounded by people, if not in person, then virtually. And so we're always interacting. And so in any one day, we are triggered multiple times. It's our stuff that comes up. So this tier is an opportunity to see how we can connect better with others. So it's all about the one-to-one and the one-to-many relationships that we have. So if you look within a team, how well do we connect to the team? How do we understand each other? How inclusive and open and curious are we? Do we give space to everybody in the team? So that's the connect piece. And this is key for succeeding in leadership. If the better our relationships are, the more productive we are. High performing teams are high performing because they work really well together. Now, another thing that high performing teams do is they connect very well together with stakeholders that are outside of their team. And that's the T, that's the thrive piece of the many to many relationships, which is also very normal. Now, a lot of teams do well on the connect piece, on the one-to-one or the one-to-many within their team or with their little circle. Today, what we need to do in order to succeed in companies is actually think of the many to many relationships and how can we thrive both internally and externally. And then bringing mindfulness into this, it's that we mentality. So when a leader speaks about I help them to reframe that to we. I help them to think outside of their team KPIs or their, OCRs or their team goals. And so that's the T piece. Again, that's the third tier, which I find with mid-level managers, we need to work on that. We need to grow that.
I think it's acknowledging that it's not just about leaders thinking about themselves, as you said, and treating themselves mindfully, but also their teams and the wider environment that helps to build innovation between teams within an organization on a much larger scale. And I think that's
Right.
it's really
Right.
important to kind of consider the wider effect of mindful leadership, not
Right.
just in
Right.
isolation. Um,
Exactly.
and to your point about middle managers as well, I think middle management is a key piece in building inclusive cultures. My next question is how does that then impact employees' mindfulness for themselves? I imagine that this is
Mm.
it sets an example for them as well.
There's a lot to be said around mindfulness and the definition of mindfulness. John Kabat-Zinn calls it, moment by moment awareness, purposely and non-judgmentally. And so there's a mindfulness practice where you sit maybe on a cushion and you meditate, or you do yoga, which is also a form of mindfulness. So there's Tai Chi, all that is mindful movement. I practice, in the program that you asked me previously, the ACT program, there's mindful walking. So there are many ways you can practice mindfulness. I do want to say that I hold the term very lightly, because for me, and a lot of people will maybe disagree with me here, and that's fine. All my intention is to help level up leaders that I'm working with so that they can be better people, that they can reach the business outcomes that are needed, but also in a generative way, in a way that is caring, in a way that's good for the world. And that's mindfulness attitudes, bringing that in. I understood that you asked the question, how does this have a ripple effect on the team, on the teams?
Yes.
That the middle management leaders coaching. So there are lots of examples. Maybe I want to give you a little bit of a story from yesterday,
Yeah.
from a team leader that I was coaching in the US. So he's a middle level manager and he has 3 teams. One of the teams that he inherited has 30 people, and we just did a restructuring together. Now, the previous manager was very like dictator-like. In other words, he was very like, you do it this way. So it was not inclusive. It was just like a telltale direct, like army style approach,
Mhm.
which is mindfulness is a very inclusive approach by nature, because mindfulness is all around actually that thrive piece eventually, that we are all the same, that we are all connected. We saw that during COVID, how, and even now, things that go on in another place in the world affects us. In companies today, companies are mostly global today. And so teams need to learn to work with this we mentality and understanding. So he has a new team and he needs to help them to empower them to lead, because what's happening is when he's in a meeting with them, so he has within one of the 3 teams he has 2 direct reports, and each of them have around 12 people in their team.
Right.
Now these direct reports are asking him permission for everything, and
Mm.
so he's saying to them, I trust you. Trust is a mindfulness attitude, by the way. You asked about the ACT program. I teach trust in the program. So he is teaching them to trust themselves, building confidence in themselves. You don't have to ask me everything. They're so used to checking in with everything. And he's saying to them, trust yourself, trust your leadership. Make a decision and just tell me what you're doing. Don't ask me, can I do this? Just tell me I'm going to do this. Or if you're not sure, come up with, I'm going to do this or this. What do you think? And so what he's doing is he's growing his people. So
Mm.
another example I want to give you, which is very much in the Thrive piece, is when they're in their team meetings, in the bigger team meetings, what he's doing is he's actually relaxing and sitting back, and he's empowering them to lead the meeting. We call it shared leadership.
Mm.
And so that's very inclusive. It's not like I'm the leader, I need to lead the team meeting. No, I'm building him so that he can be more strategic, that he can actually be watching the space in the room, even if it's virtually. His people are leading the meeting, and he's watching and noticing what's going on in he's been very mindful.
I really appreciate you giving us those examples. I think it demonstrates how mindful leadership creates natural inclusion. We're building inclusive cultures naturally just by way of learning how to connect with people better.
Mm-hmm. So I do want to say that all this takes actually a lot of intention and particular practices that you do. So, for example, in the Mindful Leadership Act series and that program we were talking about originally, anybody that coaches with me goes through the program as well. So they don't start it initially, they start coaching with me, and then what they do is they start the program. So in parallel to coaching with me, they're doing the program, and the program is filled with exercises, because in the coaching, I don't want to be training them. So they are doing exercises. So for example, they will practice an exercise that includes them being more curious. It includes them inviting in, more openness into, let's say, a meeting. So just as an example, okay, of one of the exercises in this program, such a simple exercise, they just need to practice using the and word instead of the but word, because but cancels what somebody else has said. So this exercise that whoever coaches with me will be practicing through the ACT program, they need to use the and word. So if they're having, let's say, a debate, they add something to the conversation instead of subtracting something away.
Right.
And so we do need to learn to be more inclusive, because what happens is our brains are always on the lookout for threat. That's how we're wired. And so if we don't put in certain, let's even call them habits. I call them mindful practices, but habits. Like if you don't go to yoga, okay, you're not going to be, your body is going to be more stiff.
Mm-hmm.
Our mind is also going to be the same if we don't practice, bringing intention in, deciding, making a decision. Okay, what am I going to be bringing into this meeting to create more openness, to create more inclusivity? So another example, by the way, because I want your listeners to go away with a lot of, benefits.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So another exercise within the Mindful Act Leadership Series, this online program that you do all by yourself, is counting 1, 2, 3 before you start talking. So it depends on the culture. I'm in the Middle East. In the Middle East, people talk a lot and they talk above each other. In some places, people are much more civil, but I would say that they're thinking, they're not really listening. So one of the examples is to actually count 1, 2, 3, especially if you're a person that naturally interrupts others. So you count 1, 2, 3 when the person finishes speaking before you come in. That's also teaching mindfulness. And then I have also a listening and speaking exercise, because, for example, now, okay, you are interviewing me. It's also very natural for you to be sometimes thinking, okay, what's my next question going to be? Yeah. So you're not really, and people do this in meetings. They think, okay, what am I going to be like? Someone that's not confident. What I see a lot is that they're thinking, okay, what should I say? How can I contribute to the conversation so that people think I'm smart? And the truth is they're not really listening, because they like under pressure about what can they say.
Yeah.
Especially, when this especially happens, when they not only with their team, but they're with, let's say, peers, or they're with higher levels of management, especially if they're ambitious and they want to grow in their career. And so they're not really listening. So mindful listening, which is a huge benefit, teaches you just practice what happens if you're not thinking about what you want to say. We're really listening to the person, because what actually happens is that you automatically comes up what you want to say. But people don't know that if they've never practiced that, right?
No, I think that's very true. I suppose what I'd like to understand at an organizational level, from like the top level, what can organizations expect to see as a gain? What benefits can the organization see?
Mm. Right. So that's a great question. Depending on if the organization has, rolled out the Mindful Leadership program, when they do that, up to now, I have only done the program within, it gets given as part of the package when people are working with me. So I haven't yet brought it into organizations. That's one of the things we spoke about, that, maybe one of your organizations. But what can the organization see? The more people that practice mindfulness, they're going to show up with more intention. And what they're going to be doing also is deciding how they want to show up, and then seeing what the gap is between what they want and what their impact is. So that's a big thing that we teach in the program. And so how we check that is by getting feedback. It's the only way you can check that. So it's either 360 feedback or asking people. I'm a big fan of asking people for feedback, because when you create that in the culture, that you're asking people for feedback, then they're more happy to give it. And when you introduce that, and that's also, by the way, part of this program, the ACT program, is you learn in your team to create that. Because a lot of people suffer from when they receive, let's say, developmental feedback, they receive it as negative feedback. And there are a lot of people that it's hard for them to receive feedback. But when you bring that into the organization as a practice throughout the organization, that people ask for feedback, their regular pulses, a lot of the big organizations have this already, but the smaller ones don't. So you get a pulse on what's going on. Then leaders know how they can improve how they're showing up. So the big thing is to get feedback. When you get feedback around how you can show up better as a manager, as an individual contributor, as a leader, it doesn't matter. For me, anybody's a leader that wants to bring their intention into the moment, be influential. And so what companies will see, and what they are seeing, is they grow whatever they put in. So if you plant, sunflower seeds, you're not going to get an apple tree.
Yeah.
So the company is going to get anything that they invest in, they're going to get back. So the benefits are huge. If they want to invest in diversity and inclusion for creating more innovation, companies today need to innovate. If they don't innovate, they're going to be out of the market. So if you want to create a culture which is more inclusive, how do you do that? And it needs to be so mindfulness, the Mindful ACT program is very structured. There's structure there. There's structure around the exercises that you need to practice. If you're going to meditation, by the way, mindfulness is, you can have the informal practice, which could be like, informal practice would be counting 1, 2, 3 before you start speaking. Somebody stops speaking, you count 1, 2, 3. That's an informal practice. Another informal practice could be maybe just taking 3 breaths, if you feel your mind's wandering. I don't know. Like, there are different informal practices you can take. But a formal practice would be mindful sitting. So like a Vipassana meditation, mindful sitting or mindful walking is a formal practice. So these are all structured. Everything that I've spoken about is an exercise. It's a practice. It's a habit. It's structured until it becomes natural. So companies will see the benefit from whatever mindfulness exercise or practice that is introduced, or leaders that are showing up and bringing mindfulness into their meetings, they will see the benefits of more diversity and inclusion. They'll see the benefits of, team leaders talking more and showing up and driving, and then the leaders above them having more time for strategic thinking. People complain today that they have no time to think. They need time to think. That's where innovation is going to come out of thinking and working together.
Absolutely. And I think that strategic piece is and allowing leaders to have that time for strategic thinking is really valuable for organizations to help drive their teams, but also their innovation, their productivity, and all of those great things that organizations care about. Just before we finish, Samantha, I just wanted to give you the opportunity to maybe touch on something that we haven't touched on that you'd like to kind of bring up as an important point or topic that perhaps you would like the audience to take away from this conversation.
Yeah. Thank you for asking. Believe in yourself. You know what's best for you. You have things that you know could be generative, good for you. So maybe choose every day something that you've been putting off. Could even be something small, like, I often, when I'm coaching leaders, I take a very much holistic approach, because when a leader is well-rounded in all their life areas, they're sharp as a much better leader. And so anything that you've been putting off, make a date, put it in your calendar. So maybe you can't put it, you can't do that today. See where in your month you can put that in. And whether it's a practice you want to start practicing, whether it's taking a few breaths, just before a meeting starts. Believe in yourself, but show up in the way that makes you your best self, that you are also your best self for the people that you interact with every day, because emotions are contagious. So if you showing up in the best possible way that you can, you already are benefiting the company, because you are showing up in a positive way that's going to have an effect on somebody else, that their energies may be down. So every day, work on yourself. Bring that intention in to believe in yourself and say, okay, how will I show up today? What do I need today to do for me to be my best self, so that I can have an impact on others and my team, so that they can also be their best selves?
Thank you, Samantha. That was great. And thank you so much again for speaking with me this morning. I think that mindful leadership is a big, important topic when we start to discuss building inclusive cultures and how leaders can better connect with their workers. So I hope that the audience also took something away from this. I think there were great examples of what mindfulness is, some kind of things that people can do already that can help them to bring mindfulness to their work. So thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you so much for inviting me here today.
It's been a pleasure to have you, Samantha.